Peace. What's going on? Just gonna wait for a few people to arrive. See the topic. Let that marinate for a quick minute. So again, just gonna wait for a few more people to come in, and then we will go over that. Let me grab something real quick. All right. Again, just gonna wait for a few more people to pop in. You see the topic. That's what we're gonna talk about for a little bit. What up? Yo, Jack, I was about to call you earlier, brother. I'm not sure if you left out yet for New Orleans. I don't know if it was this week, but hit me up. I was just about to call you too. All right. Again, just wait for a few people to show up before we begin. We're going to kind of continue. Excuse me. We are going to continue the topic in a different aspect that we talked about. What we talked about Sunday. Okay, brother. All right. So I'll definitely hit you up. But we're going to shift it to a different aspect, peace, Sister Oni. This more will focus on the Egyptian left hand practice of it. We talked about a few days ago, whenever that was, I think it was Tuesday, I believe. We talked about sorcery being a quick system or method of obtaining results. It's a very powerful form, or aspect of black magic or left-hand path principles and practices. And when the skill is mastered, it can definitely be utilized. Again, peace, brother, doing most effective when you're trying to get quick results. Very, very, very important. So what I'm going to do is kind of continue that discussion and kind of bring it into how it kind of connects to what we talked about a few days ago. All right. So I'm just going to wait for a few more to come in so I ain't got to repeat myself. Again, last time we talked, we were using the concepts of Luciferian and Sith sorcery. Now, what one needs to focus on in general, sorcery is sorcery regardless of, what system you're using, because you're trying to use that methodology. It works the same way. Now, there might be different methods that govern the way you use that based on the spiritual system that you're using. For an example, like we talked about on Tuesday, Luciferian and Sith sorcery, very similar, but yet the spiritual, I don't want to say traditions, but the system of how it's done, there might be a slight variation in that. So that's the key to that. All right. So what we want to talk about today, though, connected now, how does that connect to the Egyptian left-hand path? How does that connect to the deity Set? So you see the title, Sorcery and Black Magic and Sethanic practice, or working it through that system and using the power of Set. As we know, the deity Set being the most powerful deity on the left-hand path of ancient Egypt. He would be your equivalent to the Prince of Darkness, or what one would call Satan or the devil, falsely, in the Christian monotheistic paths. Now, when you hear that term, and the reason why a practitioner on this path shies away from what I like to call that false, or that religious Euro-Satanist aspect or Church of Satan aspect of it, is because To me, that's more religious when you try to coincide that, because you'll even have people, and as I've mentioned before, in the conscious community, they will try to synchronize Set as some negative, evil entity, and they try to synchronize it with who Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, or monotheistic religions say is the devil. So that mythology has to be broken up. Because again, as I've mentioned before, when you're saying the term Satan, you're just saying the term adversary. And it's an archetype. It represents a state of mind. It represents being adverse, again, to the norm, a non-conformist, a free thinker, which is exactly the same thing when you connect it to the Egyptian aspect of Set, being representing the isolated consciousness. Same exact thing. But we have to remove the stigmas and the stereotypes of this being something, quote unquote, what monotheism classifies as being evil or negative, when in actuality it's completely the opposite. And again, the left-hand path of that term is just that. It's a term. So it's important we don't get caught up in titles, because titles sometimes can falsely classify certain things. Okay. Left-hand path is a term, again, which is opposite of the right. The left is always depicted as being negative or different, etc. So what it's basically a representation of an individual, again, not taking a nonconformist mentality. All right. So we have to be careful with terms. We use these titles and terms just so we can identify with it on some level. But when you're dealing with truth, that you've raised that truth up to your own personal realization, and you're getting results from that truth or those things that you're practicing, there's really no title you can put on that. You understand? Truth is just that. When it becomes a reality to you, no matter what you call it, it becomes a reality to you. Only a reality to you when you can confirm it for self. Truth is not accepting something that somebody else says without you having raised yourself up to the reality or experiencing it. That's the difference. All right. So what I want to get into, I'm going to go through this section here. I picked out a short section from the Necrominion book that'll touch a little bit on this. It's a very short section. And then we'll kind of elaborate and build on it a little bit, and we'll kind of get into it. Yeah, I got to put the old man glasses on. It's damn print. All right. In ancient Egypt, we're going to talk about controlling and commanding the Natiru through Heker or through black magic. Because the same concept, whether you call it black magic, sorcery, is about, again, the magician enforcing or imposing his will to adjust the outcome for a situation in his favor, right? So it says, in ancient Egypt, the cosmos was held in balance by the Natiru and the associative aspects of nature, which they held sway over. This cycle of battle to maintain balance was carried out by the many Natiru, in which daily and nightly struggle is present in their religious and mythological records. Magicians and Egyptian priests in antiquity were nearly identical in every way. Priests were paid specialists in rituals, just as magicians. Egyptian priests did not teach morality, and their interest was the ritualistic process of compelling a Natir or Natiru to act according to the desire of the client or even the priest. Now, there's something interesting here that we can't negate, all right? It says, let's back up here. It says the Egyptian priests did not teach morality, right? I don't know if anybody caught that part. Now, that doesn't mean, I want to make this clear because we've discussed this in certain aspects. It don't mean that one shouldn't have some level of morality, but one has to understand morals. It's a personal thing. And I bring this up because this is another aspect when people are delving into these spiritual practices, it's hard for them to kind of not be influenced or controlled by their personal morals. Because when you're working with your subjective realm or you're working black magic, as I mentioned numerous times before, you cannot let personal morals, dogmas, philosophies, personal beliefs, ideologies, none of that can influence your work. It don't mean you can't draw upon the strength of those things that might help you, but when those things are limiting your thinking or limiting your growth or limiting your progress, then it becomes a hindrance. So when one is approaching a greater black magical working, in this case, one has to leave all of that stuff completely behind. And notice it said in that excerpt, okay, it clearly stated that the Egyptian priests were not concerned or did not practice or teach morality, right? So we need to understand what that means. What it basically means is, it didn't mean that they were savages. It just meant they didn't let personal morals clog and block them from obtaining the result or the situation that they were working with, all right? That's something we have to discipline ourselves to. You understand? Easier said than done. I know a lot of people say, oh, I don't have no problem doing that. I don't find that to be the case all the time. You understand? Peace if I missed anybody. Peace, Sister Mandy. I said what's up to Oni, Smooth to God. Yeah, if I missed anybody. But so I wanted to point that out. So when the Egyptian priests, as it said in that excerpt, were practicing black magic or sorcery, they were not concerned with teaching morality. That's a hard pill to swallow because we get this false impression from a lot of the things that we've read on the surface and in certain conscious circles, like everything about Egypt was peace and love and all, and that wasn't the case. There is a very intense, powerful, aggressive side of ancient Egypt that nobody talks about when dealing with Heka or black magic, right? All right, so let's go back and we're going to finish this excerpt and then we'll talk on it. And again, if you got questions, you could go ahead and type them in. I'll get to them once we're done with this, all right? All right, so magicians are also nearly identical to this. The difference is that magicians, in a modern sense, are upon the self-directed initiatory path and conduct workings for them more often than they would a client. Magicians, however, are specialists in their knowledge and experience of the black arts and have no moral conflictions about offering their specialty to those who pay. This is, of course, to the black adept, is a personal choice and up to their chosen path in life. And I can relate to this because if you're an individual that practices magic for yourself or you do work for clients, you have to have that mindset. Now, anytime I ever do intense work, it always has to be in accordance with the client's will. This is something that you must understand. So if I've done any intense work for a client in the past, of course, I always make sure that it's in accordance with their will and then this is something that they want to do. But people have to understand when going that route in certain situations and scenarios, as I mentioned, many times in the past, you can't have any regrets, doubts, or second guessing things when it comes to that. So it takes a certain mindset to be effective and carry out some of these spiritual systems and spiritual practices. Very important. Okay. All right, let's get back in. We're going to finish this. Like the Sethanist and Luciferian of today, the ancient priesthood of Kem practiced magic for the pharaonic state and for private purposes for thousands of years. Magic may be utilized to compel change for the benefit of society as well as an individual's goals. Now, I'm going to stop there. I always ask people that come on this path, and I'm going to stop there because this is important. Why are you practicing magic? Now, I use the term here in this sense to benefit society. It also mentions having some focused goals. You understand? What are you practicing magic for? Again, you must ask yourself that. Why do you want to practice this path? Why do you want to be on this path? Is it for selfish? And I'm going to tell you, it's a simple answer. And I'm not saying that this should be the answer for everybody, but I think the answer that's simple that I'm going to give, I think you can tie a lot of different areas into that same answer, even if you individualize it. If you're doing it just for, greed and personal gain and revenge and all that shit's going to come up and bite you in the ass. You understand? That's not what you're basically, putting gasoline on a fire and walking past it with gasoline drawers on. That's basically what you're doing. The answer is simple. And every time I ask that question, I get people try to overthink it too much. They just give me all these crazy fucking answers. The answer is to improve and better yourself. That should be the main reason. Now, you can tie a lot of things into that, because some people go, to fix my finances, to fix this, or to bet. All that ties into that. The main reason why you're supposed to be on this path, you understand, is because you want to perfect yourself. You want to bring out the divine, the potential in yourself, the best that that is laying dormant within you. Now, you could, again, there's many areas you can tie. Of course, there has to be some type of you gravitating towards this path, obviously, because part of it has to be connected to us spiritually. For any system you practice, there has to be that attraction there. So that's one part of it. But the main reason why you should want to be on this path is because most of us, I'm sure majority of us here, have been through an influx of different spiritual systems. I mean, I know from some of you and from, others, we went through, be it monotheistic religions of Islam, Christianity, or Judaism. Some of us went through, African traditions and spiritual systems and Kemetic studies and Buddhism and Ifa. And, we went through all those to realize we got what we got out of it, but we still felt like there was still something that was lacking. And I think that's where this path picks up, because this path is what brings the God or the goddess out in you, because it's not limited. It gives you the ability and the opportunity to fully explore yourself and explore the universes that reside within you by way of your subjective realm. It just opens up a doorway to unlimited potential. This is why one should seek to be on this path, not because it's cool and not because it's dark and dreary and it looks, fortunately, some people get caught up in that. They really do. And they get caught up in all the physical external things. And that energy is not put towards to working, within and fixing the things they need to correct about themselves and things of that nature. All right. So let me continue. I just wanted to stop there because that's an important thing to focus on. Goals and why do you practice this? All right. Obviously, it is far more advantage for the Black Adept to utilize his or her specialty for personalized goals due to the energy involved in compelling an objective manifestation for the benefit of society or self. Magicians may use spells to direct and compel a deific mask or deity or archetype to manifest the Black Adept's desire. This should be a balanced perception in applying it. Material gain in the physical world is obviously desirable. In turn, we must focus on our initiatory practice in gaining experience, insight, and wisdom, and power within a mental and spiritual plane as well. Let me stop there, because here's another problem. I'll ask people, a lot of people come on this path because they want, a lot of it is usually centered around money and finances. But did you see what the second part said? You must also be grounded in knowledge and wisdom, right? And spiritual practices and spiritual knowledge of the spiritual plane as well. So what happens is people want to come in and start working spells and magic, say for finances, but they haven't corrected shit about themselves that's fucked up. And then they want to know why they're not getting no results. So they might have personal issues, anger issues, emotional issues that they have not addressed about themselves or corrected. And they're trying to go into a spell or a magical practice, and there's a disconnect there. So what this is saying here, you can't just, go into a certain practice and you haven't made the preparations to prepare for that practice. Because as I've said before in the past, sometimes people don't get results because there's another need area or aspect of their life they need to address and work on, as opposed to the one that they think is immediate at the time. Shit, who doesn't need money at what point? We all need money at what point? There's no such thing as ever having enough of money, right? And I've always shared with people the most effective way I work with finances is I don't focus on one particular thing. Now, some people do that, and I'm not saying if you have done it and you've gotten results, power to you. Again, I'm only speaking on what has worked for me. I always do financial work just for consistency in all areas of my life. I don't focus on one thing. And I find when you're doing spiritual work financially and you're working on consistency, you have all the things that you need provided for you. You have, the cars that you need, the place you need to live, the money to pay the bills, things of that nature. I don't focus on one specific thing. I've found that energy doesn't work productive for me. Now, there might be somebody else out here watching now, or maybe watch this later when it's uploaded or recorded, that they focus on something. Now, power to you. You got the result because you probably were in desire need of it. But you might be in a situation where you're not getting that result quick because there's something else going on. So yeah, you have to get yourself in order first. But I've even, worked with some clients and some that I'm working with right now who have found that they've switched it up, and I told them to try it. Focus on consistency when you're working money rituals. And you'll find that in every area you need it, be it for bills, if you're trying to get something accomplished for you, but whatever it is you're trying to do, you want that flow of consistency with finances. And remember, when you're petitioning the cosmos, right? We use this term in alchemy. When you're petitioning and you're sending that energy out there, it's important to understand that you ask for what you need. Because what tends to happen, people, again, are not practical in that area. You're not going to light a candle and do a ritual and $1 million is just going to fall in your lap. That's not going to happen. You understand? You have to be able to petition the cosmos, and I'm just using a metaphorical alchemical term, for what you need. And if you petition for what you need, you'll find things come back in abundance. You understand? That's how this path works. Couple quick announcements. I know I sent out today, and I just sent it out to everybody, whether you're local or here in the state. I sent out the flyer, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, about that event that we have coming up here in Fort Lauderdale area on May 25th. Now, again, I just send that out to everybody. A couple people from out of state have already emailed me to attend. I did reply back to a few of you before I came on air. But I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Just going to get into the and again, as I've said before, moving forward, we're not disclosing the location until you get the invite. That's to prevent a bunch of knuckleheads from or unwanted people showing up or people not coming on time, which we've had a little bit of that issue in the past. So now we have it more organized and airtight where we will avoid those things moving forward. But anyway, I want to finish with this so I don't lose my train of thought, and then I'll get back into that in a little bit. And again, I'm going to go back through the chat log and see your questions and your comments, so you can feel free to keep typing them in, and I'm going to go back over that and review it. All right. So we left off here. Think as a whole towards long-term goals, often wisdom and power, including attaining evolving levels of self-excellence. Let me stop there. Wisdom and power. I like to utilize the symbolic story of Solomon in the Bible, right? And this is how I approach my work. And I use that metaphor of the Solomon story in the Bible. What does it say in the Bible about Solomon? When so-called God of the Bible asked Solomon, ask for anything you want and I'll give it to you. And what did Solomon ask for? The wisdom, right? He wanted the wisdom and the knowledge, right? And everything else was given to him. See, I bring that up because use that Solomon template in approaching your magic. I do my work because I want that knowledge and wisdom. I want to become strong in my spiritual power first before I focus on all the physical stuff. You understand? Because if you have the spiritual knowledge and wisdom, everything else is going to fall into place. So sometimes I think, and this is why, again, it goes back to what I was saying a few minutes ago. What is your purpose for being on this path? And that should also tie into the aspect of bettering yourself, is to increase your knowledge, your wisdom, and your power, right? Because if you have knowledge, wisdom, and power, in essence, what else do you really need if you have knowledge, wisdom, and power? What do you really need? What else do you need outside of knowledge, wisdom, and power? You see, people come in and negate that. And that goes back into the other principle I was talking about earlier. You must focus on things of the spiritual plane and things within before you focus on the physical things, right? That's what it was saying earlier, right? If you have that knowledge, wisdom, and power, right, it opens up different areas of understanding of how things are communicated and how you perceive things. And you'll find, because when people that come in and start focusing on the physical first, as if this is some quick fix all for all your fucked up shit, like you ain't got to address it or do any work with it. You know, boom, I'm just going to do a ritual, light a candle, and all my bullshit is fixed. That's not how it works. All right. So it's important to understand that. All right. Always focus on that. All right. So it goes on to say, I'm going to read that part again. Thinking as a whole towards long-term goals, you should always have goals on this path, right? We teach a thing, you should write your goals out in increments, in 6 months increments, because that sets a realistic bar. Don't do it in no spooky way where, 5 years from now, I want to do this and that and have a minute. No. The best way to gauge your success on this path and keep it practical and realistic, lay out 6-month goals for yourself in increments of 6. Trust me when I tell you, this is very important. You'll find when you do that, you're setting realistic expectations, number one, and it constantly keeps you active and motivated to do work. Because what happens is when you start looking too far ahead and planning unrealistic goals, you get discouraged and then you just stop doing it because you're not seeing the results, because everybody wants everything fast, right away, right now. Set your goals in increments of 6 and you'll be surprised of how the results come quicker, because you're devoting more energy and time and spiritual power to obtaining those results, because it's condensed into a smaller period of time and it's much more effective. Trust me when I tell you that. Trust me. All right. So always set goals, including attaining evolving levels of self-excellence, balanced with lesser short-term goals, orphan carnal and materialistic desires. Those are your short-term goals, the material and the carnal things in life. That's not your long-term goals. Those are your momentarily goals when you desire something, right? Physically, be it something sexual or financially, be it a materialistic object. That's a temporary goal and a temporary moment or of satisfaction, right? Know how to differentiate between the two. Don't get fucking crossed up with getting so engrossed in the one where it's distracting you from other areas in your life that you need to work on. That's very important to understand. All right. If the black adept is more spiritual than the agatho demon, will guide towards the long-term initiatory insight, while if more carnal, less concerned with the spiritual aims, the instinctual guide will towards materialistic achievements. That's kind of just what I was saying about the balancement. You got to know the fine line between the two and how both of them work together. The knowledge we have today of Egyptian magic is from ancient funerary spells of the coffin text, the Book of the Dead, the Book of the Heavenly Cow, and others from different periods, which blended Egyptian sorcery with other cultural associations from various traditions, right? Material which possessed Heka in a more obvious way was Thoth. The temple at Hermopolis contained a library with scrolls of magic and forgotten lore. As the inventor of writing, Thoth or Tahuti knew the importance of knowledge, that this could guide a magician to being able to control and focus Heka according to his or her desire. Tahuti was a balance-keeping Natir. His knowledge was invaluable to the other Natir. It had no value, right? In myth, Tahuti was a link with the two symbols of power within magic, the sun and the moon, right? They also tied Tahuti into the baboon deity or the lunar deity, right? The two Ujet eyes, inscriptions, and I'm almost done with this. on the magical wands from the 20th century BCE depict Tahuti, the baboon, which I was just talking about, next to an Ujat eye. And that's why they say Tahuti rules in the lunar cycle, right? Tahuti is the deity that governs the lunar energies, right? Now, you have to be careful with that because that fine line of balancement, remember, the term lunatic has its root in the word lunar, right? Now, you can take this back to lycanthropy, vampirism, or the science of the werewolf, right? Because there was the energies that were emitted from the moon that brought out that powerful energy or aspects of those spiritual paths. So we have to also understand when working this path how we work with lunar and solar energy right now, because remember, some archetypes tie into the solar energy and some work with the lunar. They're different forces, they're different energies. You have to also educate yourself to this when working spiritual rituals. Are you calling upon a lunar or a solar deity? And have you educated yourself to how that energy works, how you need to facilitate it, and are you educated to how each one affects you? Because they're going to affect you differently. Some of us are solar energy type of beings. Some of us are lunar, people of the night, more chaotic, things of that nature, where the solar ones are a little bit more, could be laid back, but yet warrior-like. And then there's some that kind of have a blend of both. And the blend of both is what you want, because when you have the blend of both, you learn to discipline yourself to facilitate when you need to tap in to those energies. All right. So understand that. That's very important. Let me finish this here. All right. If Sekhmet made her Ba manifest as the Ujat eye, it was the sun, however. It was the destroying heat used for the defense of Re, or the magician seeking its Sekhem. Sekhem would be like your chi. It's the Egyptian term for your inner power, the energy that resides within, right? Sekhem. And it's not a coincidence that Sekhmet phonetically almost sounds the same as the word, the Egyptian power, the word for Egyptian power, Sekhem. Not a coincidence, because Sekhmet represents that raw power, right? That raw power that one needs sometimes to draw upon when you need to get things done. Sometimes there's certain situations and scenarios that you're dealing with in life. You can't invoke a passive, laid back, peaceful energy, because there's certain situations that call for that Malcolm X type energy, by any means necessary, right? That was a saying from Brother Malcolm, any means necessary. Well, sometimes a black adept has to take that same approach. By any means necessary, this is what I need to do to get the job done and get the results. Sekhmet is one of those energies you want to draw upon. Set is one of those energies that you want to draw upon. Remember, Sekhmet led the revolt of the 72 conspirators of Set, right? Some say the Goetia, but I like to refer to them what they were, the 72 conspirators of Set. Now, do the mathematical breakdowns. Not a coincidence you got 7 and 2 is 9, right? 9 is the sacred number of Set. You understand? When we do rituals in black magic, in the beginning of the ritual, we toll the bell 9 times to open the gate of the black flame, right? And we end the ritual with the same thing. We're tolling the bell 9 times. Excuse me one sec. I have to send this text. There's not a coincidence in that. Not a coincidence. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, but there's that sacredness to the number 9, as we all know. Not a coincidence. All that stuff is connected, but that's what you're dealing with when you're working with Sekhmet. It's not a passive, laid back, very peaceful type of energy, to say the least. Remember, Sekhmet also holds the Pekibet knife, the knife of separation. Set also holds the Pekibet knife, the knife of separation. Kali also is depicted with the Pekibet knife, separation. What that is symbolic of when you're working your rituals and you're focusing in on what these archetypes represent is the Pekibet knife is a knife that's used to literally carve and pull apart and separate things. It also represents their character and nature and personality, which is what you should be tapping into when you're working with those archetypes. You're supposed to be focusing on that part of your psyche, right? All right. Then it goes on to say, the eye of the moon, called the lunar eye, was the one Tahuti restored to Heru as a protective amulet. It was the talismanic symbol which can be used by both the living and the dead. Heru was a healing deific mask, also a magician who is known by the epithet of enchanter. Aset is a very powerful material. She is a sorceress, an enchanter, and a ruling deific mask who Bas manifested many different forms, known as the Great of Magick, Heka. Aset assists Heru and Osir and even Set, whom she has loving feelings towards. It is an Aset who is able to learn the secret and powerful name of Re or Ra in order to gain his magical powers. Let's focus on that story for a minute, all right? How come nobody talks about that story right there? The story of, I've talked about this over the years, and this book just brought it up again, and now it reminded me. I'm going to revisit this real quick, okay? Everybody always depicts Aset as this motherly, nurturing female goddess. And this excerpt here referred to Aset as a sorceress, right? Now, if you have not familiarized yourself with how she obtained the sacred name of Ra, you need to go back into the Egyptian text and read the story and read it closely and see now what your depiction or what your perception of Aset or how you look at it now, it's going to change. Now, the story goes, she tried to get the, Ra's sacred magical name by tricking him. Or is that how we should look at it? Let's look at this in a couple of ways. She was able to obtain some of his bodily fluids, right? And she was able to cast a spell to get him weak, sick, and under control. And the only way he would be cured was if he gave up his sacred name, right? Well, he tries to bullshit her at first, and she knows because of the way the spell was casted. Because the spell was casted, if he gave up the correct name, then the spell would be released. But he didn't know that. So he tried to bullshit her at first. And when she said, look, that's not the name. Long story short, you can go read it for yourself. He winds up giving her the name. She gets the sacred name, and it opens her up to all the secrets in the universe and the power that Ra had and a lot of these magical practices and things of that nature. Now, some people look at that. I remember having a conversation years ago with men about this. Some men got chauvinistic about it, like, oh, she had no right to do that. Why? Because she was a female? Doesn't Aset have the right to know, just as any other male or female did, if she wanted to gain the secrets? See, where did people fuck up with the story is she didn't try to kill or destroy Ra. She tried to use her spiritual power and outwit him. Her intent was never to kill or permanently destroy or hurt him, but she was able to use her knowledge, right? I was talking about knowledge, wisdom, and power, right? I hope you catch him for why I said what I was saying earlier. If you have the knowledge, the wisdom, and the power, you can do whatever you want to do. She relied on her knowledge, wisdom, and power. That's why in the ancient Egyptian mystery systems, the female is symbolic of the feline, right? And what are cats called? They're called felines, right? It mentioned Bast in here, different manifestations of Bast or Bastet. And when you see Bast or Bastet, she's always depicted with the face of a lion or some type of lioness or cat type of figure. You understand? because the female goddess, not only were they intelligent, wise warriors, they were more crafty and more of sorcerers or sorceress than the men were, right? This is a fact. Women knew how to draw upon that feline energy and work their magic by way of Hecker and controlling the forces. Because remember, what did it say? This is about using and controlling the deific mask through Hecker for the will of the magician. She was able to do that in this story of Ra. See, people ain't looking at it from its correct perspective. They get caught up in the surface shit and their emotions and all that bullshit. And that's not what this is talking about. Okay? So the men are referred to as the canine, right? What are dogs, right? We even in this day and time, a term that actually started from what was that movie with Spike Lee put out years ago, where they start first calling themselves She's Gotta Have It. Was it She's Gotta Have It? It might have been. That's where the term, this cultural term that started in the 80s that we still use today, right? You hear people, brothers greeting you, "What's up, dog?" Right? We haven't really studied or know where that has come from. You understand? We haven't really reflected on where that has come from, right? But the men are referred to as the canines, right? Because we are more reactionary creatures in a sense, more, quick to, indulge without thinking, right? Duma had typed in, yes, Anubu connects to that, also to that masculine aspect of the canine. Very important, okay? Very important not to negate. But the story of Aset and the feline and the feminine cannot be negated. And when you look at the story of how Aset obtained that sacred name to get that magical power, again, like I mentioned earlier, I had a conversation with men, I remember years ago about this, and they were like, "Oh, she was she was, she wasn't in her right place to do that, this and that." Why? Because she's a female and you're a man and you don't feel like she's entitled to this shit. That's chauvinistic in itself. You understand what I'm saying? So yeah, we definitely have to look at this in its correct perspective, not look at it from a personal, how your personal opinion is about it. When you look at it, how, she applied the magical context and principle of how she obtained the name, she didn't violate anything. Okay. You got to look at this as a whole. You can't look at this just personal. All right. Then it goes on to say, here's the story, actually. The myth of Aset and Re is that the sun Nita had grown old. Some of his saliva fell to the earth. Aset used his saliva and mixed it with clay, fashioning a snake. This is how she cast the spell, right? This serpent hid on the path where Re walked each day until it finally bit him. Filled with poison, Aset told Re the only way she could save him was to know his true name. Re provided many names. He was the Nita who had created heaven and earth and made the Nile rise. Darkness covered the earth when he closed his eyes and was daylight again when he opened them. His name in the morning was Khepri, right? Re at midday and Atum in the evening. Finally, when his pain from the bite was too much, he uttered the name to Aset, who then cured the Natir. Sorcery is significant in ancient Egypt, as demonstrated in the Leiden Papyrus and other papyri. By the time of the Leiden Papyrus, dated to the 3rd century AD, presents an assimilation of different Judaic, Greek, Syrian, Mesopotamian, albeit very slightly, and Egyptian deific masks and incantations. Utilizing these spells can be highly useful and bring no small amount of results to the sorcerer investing his personal belief. All right. So that's just a brief breakdown of how that sorcery connects with Egyptian Sethanic practice. Now, remember, this is all centered around the deity Set. We can't negate that, because you will find that when doing a lot of these invocations or rituals of sorcery, you will find that Set is at the center of them and invoked. even when you're including some of these other solar and lunar deities, okay? But this is how sorcery works. Real quick before I forget, and I'm gonna go through some of the questions. As I was mentioning earlier, I know some of you got the flyer today. If you're on the email list or the text list, or you know me personally, you got the flyer today for the ritual on May 25th. Now, I've sent it out to everybody, whether you're in the state of Florida or you're out of the state, just so you can be aware. I just want to, again, go over the flyer. Is pretty simple, straight to the point. It is by invite only. That's why there's no address on the flyer. That was done intentionally. So we're trying to keep a controlled environment in this working ritual. We're trying to keep things flowing and on time. This is to avoid, again, a couple of things. People showing up unannounced, number one, or two, not showing up on time, things of that nature. So the few people that I know a couple of you from out of state emailed me today. The few that did request an invite and want to come, I did respond back to you today. Told you the requirements for the ritual, what you need to, bring and how you need to be dressed, and gave you the area that it's in. The exact address will be given to you the week of. But if you do need to book a flight, I will tell you the general area to stay in, so you're close to where the ritual is. So I just want to be clear. That's the conditions. Don't email me and ask me for the exact location. If you haven't 100% committed to fully come, that information will be given to you a few days before. But you'll know the general area of where we will be doing that. Okay. So that will definitely be given at the time that it needs to be given. Yeah, unbelievable. All right, so and again, if you are on the some people had also texted me, and I've responded back to that. So I definitely will disclose that information when the information need be. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through some of the comments or questions. I'm going to scroll back up to the top. All right. Earlier, Oni had typed in, everyone has a different way to deal with integrities and morals. That's important to understand. Morals are just that, personal. Let's not forget that. Because what might be a personal moral to you may not be a personal moral to somebody else. Now, I'm saying this with discretion, in the sense, it don't mean you go out of your way to intentionally disregard everything and be, completely disrespectful or rude. There's just basic morals that one should have, everyday basic morals. We're not talking about that stuff. We're not talking about, helping an old person if they fall. That's just common sense shit. We're not talking about morals. We're not talking about be nice to children. That's normal shit. Don't hurt or harm children. That's normal morals. That's just everyday morals. We're talking about some things that people might look at when you're doing in rituals. Be it, it could be sex magic. It could be chaos magic. It could be certain things that maybe some would look at it as against their personal morals and some wouldn't. That's where it becomes personal. So understand how you deal with that personal or your how you look at the integrity of those morals is going to be based and fall, within those categories. So that's important to understand, especially on this path. When you're trying to obtain things and get things done, because if you don't look at it in that perspective, you're going to struggle. So yeah, that's definitely a good point. Let's see what else we missed. Okay, I'm skipping just the personal comments. I'm not going to read those when some of you guys are chatting within each other. Yeah, I was talking earlier. Manny had typed in, live and learn, no doubt, no regrets, and you have to approach it on that level, because You're going to make mistakes. And I've always told people this. When you say live and learn, you learn from your mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from them and they don't keep repeating themselves. Now, when you keep making the same mistake and it keeps repeating itself, now it's become a personal thing with you. It's become a bad habit you formed. And that's when you got to really get grips on it, get it under control, and deal with it. Now you're dealing with a personal issue. But again, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to continue to make mistakes. But as long as it's not the same mistake, that's how you live, learn, and grow. And the regret part, when I was talking about earlier, when you're doing certain things on this path, you can't have no regrets. Because we talked a little bit about that on the last show when we were talking about sorcery. You can't do a working and second guess it and have doubts or wonder if that was the right thing to do, this and that. All of that stuff destroys the energy of the working, and in essence destroys the working itself. So that's why I say you always have to go in. I've always told people this when you're doing work. Go into that work, lay it out, map it out. What is your intent? What are you trying to accomplish? What are the results you're looking for? And are the results desirable and practical? Practical. If you just recklessly go into it and don't even put any serious consideration or thought into it, that usually is a recipe for failure. You understand? Usually a recipe for failure. So very important. No regrets. Live and learn. No doubt. Oni had asked earlier, my question is, how do you maintain it on the long term? Like after you do a ritual, get results, then it gets harder, you get the results. Again, well, how you maintain it is staying consistent. I've talked about this before in the past. All right, let me give you an example. If you're doing work for a certain situation, be it finances, healing, or some type of personal issue you're trying to fix about yourself, say you got anger issues. What I mean by staying consistent at it, and I've used the analogy of a car. When you buy a car, if you don't do the regular maintenance on the car doesn't perform well, right? You got to do the regular oil change. You got to rotate the tires. You got to do whatever repairs you need to do on the engine to keep the car performing at its peak, right? Well, use that same analogy when you're working magic on this path. Sometimes you have to stay at it consistent for a long period of time by repeating. It could be the same type of work or ritual or something similar, but you might have to keep, putting energy on it to keep that consistency to get that results. What tends to happen is some people, and again, I'm not saying this is you in this case, some people will do something once, twice, maybe 3 times, and then they don't do it again. And then what happens is things go back to being the way they were because they didn't stay consistent at it. So I want to make that clear. This path is always about a path of doing consistent work, number one. And number two, nobody should ever approach this path. And again, this is not directed to you, Sister Only. I'm speaking in general now. Nobody should ever come on this path thinking they're going to be able to do something one time and that's it, and it's fixed forever. That's not grounded in reality. One is always harnessing their power to keep that situation favorable or in accordance with their will. So this is why we say, or you hear, I always use the term, you must do the work. You must stay consistent and do the work. So the best way to keep those results, coming is by staying consistent at that work. Okay. Mandy mentions intuition earlier, right? We use that term, intuition. Some use our inner being, our inner self, our higher self. Yes, that intuition is really a representation of that God or goddess that resides within. That's the God in you speaking to you and communicating to you. And you always want to pay attention to that because we can reflect back on many times in life how we've gone against that inner voice and how it's bitten us in the ass, because usually that intuition or that intuitive voice, that's guiding you. It's guiding you in the right area of the direction that you need to be in. All right. And Jack had to put the answer in. I was talking about being on this path of purpose to become a better person in all levels, no doubt. Okay, then Oni also I typed in, I mainly practice Native American spirituality and Ifa, and that's good. Both of those systems touch on a lot of areas, but I would also suggest to you, don't limit yourself just to those two. Um, I mean, that could be your focal areas of work, and that's fine. We all have areas that we specialize in, but don't limit yourself. Never limit yourself on this path. You should always be open to studying and learning everything. All right, what else? Okay. I'm just skipping something. Yeah, Jack had typed in earlier, brother Jack, and dead on. We talk about this endlessly all the time. You have to address your personal trauma, or excuse me, or it's going to get you later down the road on this path. And I've seen that happen a multitude of times to many people. They've come in and they've either masked or pushed it to the side or covered it. And they found out at some point, and I'm going to tell you this from experience and from seeing others also, it will come to the surface, usually at the time where you're not really in a position to have to deal with it. And that's what you don't want. So when you come on the path and you got certain things and you know you're better off addressing it right then and there before you just say, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and do this and I'm not going to worry about it now. It's going to come up, trust me. And as I've said before, I've seen it 99.9% of the times pop up at the most inopportune time. Trust me when I tell you that. So it makes the test and the challenge even harder. So you definitely don't want to pretend if you know it's there and you're completely ignoring. Now, granted, let's touch on the flip side. There are some things that are there buried in the subconscious that we're not aware that are also affecting us. So I want to also flip it on that note too. I'm gonna put it on that note too. But whenever it surfaces, deal with it. Trust me. All right, what else do we got here? All right. Yeah, only those types of knowledge and wisdom, super important. I'm telling you, man. If you go into your work trying to gain knowledge, wisdom, and power, right? Everything else will fall into place. Trust me. Excuse me. Sorry. All right. Then what else we got here? Going through some of the comments here. Yeah, your goals have to be realistic, no doubt. All right, I'm just saying from this. Anything else on this? There's just a lot of personal comments. I'm just kind of going to skip some of these. All right. Yeah, well, here's the thing. Only had typed in also, repeating the same thing over and over again in energy and Ifa is called a warren, the reverse TED. You keep looking back. Well, I'm saying when you're working consistently at something, and that's an ether philosophy. I'm not saying do the same exact ritual over and over again. I'm saying you might have to do different types of work, but working on the same scenario. Because if you're not getting the results consistently, that's a confirmation that something is not right, obviously. So you can't just negate it. It could be that maybe you're not definitive in doing your work. And when we use the term on the last show we did, when we say so it is done, that means it's done. Don't look back. Some people don't really stamp it with that finality. They're saying it consciously, but subconsciously they're having doubts in their head. So that applies the looking back principle. But you will find that you will have to stay on certain scenarios Again, where you're not doing this, I'm not saying the same ritual constantly over and over. You might have to work with different energies, different deific mass, different systems that carry, different levels of power or intensity of those energies to stay at it. So that's the best way to apply it. All right. Jamal Adams types in, peace, brother. I want to know if you have a website. Want to learn as much as I can. Any advice for candle work, meditation, and crystals? Been reading the Kabbalah and listening to some Manly P. Hall also, et cetera, et cetera. No, I don't have a personal website. I used to have a Facebook. It just became too much. So this is pretty much where I do most of my communicating. Now, as I've mentioned before, not sure if you're on them feeds, we do have gatherings and things of that nature, such as the one coming up on May 25th. I am just about almost finished now, which I'll be getting out within the next week or two, the curriculum for the online classes. I will be doing that, aiming to do that at the end of June. And we will be having a 2-day workshop in the fall here in Fort Lauderdale in Deerfield Beach. It'll be a 2-day workshop covering various things and topics. But that's kind of how I operate. I don't have a personal, website or anything like that as of right now. Something that I had thought about, but I just used to have one a few years back, but I stopped it. Candle work, you would have to be more specific. I work a lot of candle magic, just depends. Candle work can be done in Voodoo. It can be done in simple candle magic, such as petitioning. It's utilized in a multitude of ways. It's all, obviously you're utilizing candle magic, even in certain black magic rituals. The power of the candle usually represents something, and it's utilized for specific things. It's utilized for specific things in those rituals. Now, meditation and crystals, we had talked about that on a few shows back. Meditation is very important on this path. You should be meditating regularly for inner strength, inner power. Now, again, I've explained to people, some people confuse concentration with meditation. It's not the same thing. You have to get your concentration down packed, because without concentration, you can't get into a state of meditation. Simple techniques would be, per se, to focus on your breath. Rhythmic breathing is a good, way to focus in and get your concentration, because meditation is a state. If you're still conscious that the physical you is there, then you're in a state of concentration, not meditation. That's very important to understand. Somebody had asked, well, how do you get the concentration to the meditation? I remember from the last session we had. You can use very simple focus on an object. I find like just a flickering candle. Put yourself in an atmosphere in a dimly lit room, light the candle, focus on the candle, and get the image of the flickering candle in your mind, and then close your eyes and still visualize that flickering candle. That's a good basic exercise for concentration that will help. Rhythmic breathing is another basic. Focus on the rhythm of the breath. All of those things will, assist and aid you into getting to that. So meditation is something one should do regularly, because there's benefits to that on all levels. It deals with the visualization aspect of it. It helps you tap into your subjective realm, because when you go into state of meditation, when you're in true meditation, you are tapping into your subjective realm. And as we know, the mind has a multitude of subjective realms, not just one. Our mind creates many universes that are realities to us. May not be realities to an individual that has not created or had the same experience. It's personal. Remember, subjective is personal. The Black magician's goal is to take things on the subjective, and influence those things to bring them in accordance with their will on the objective realm. That's what greater Black magic is about. And so it's a process. Meditation and visualization have a connection to that. Now, crystals can be used on this path and on many paths for a multitude of reasons. Some people use them for healing. Some people use them for energy. So it just depends on what crystals you're working with. You can use them in conjunctions to the chakras. I mentioned a basic book that's good with dealing with the crystals and chakras and meditation and all that is a book by Ruth White. And I believe it's called Introduction to the Chakras, if I'm not mistaken. But just Google Ruth White. It's a good basic. It's a very good, simple book for somebody. Even though I would classify it more of a beginner's book. But even though it's a beginner's type of book, it's still got a lot of really good information in there, and it's very simple to use. So that's the direction I would kind of push you in. But those things can be used and done for a multitude of reasons. Not really one specific reason why those things can be used. But we use all of that regularly, for many different situations on this path. But meditation is very important. It enhances your focus and your power when done correctly, though. Okay. Now, the Kabbalion, all right. When dealing with the Kabbalion, and I want to make it clear, the Kabbalion, or as some call the 7 principles of Tahuti, don't confuse that with Kabbalah. I know there's some newcomers on the path. They confuse the Kabbalah and the Kabbalion. They're two different things. The Kabbalah, as we know, that's more dealing with Hebrew mysticism, the tree of life, the Sephirah and all that, that's not really black magic, but you can use some Kabbalah. I have worked with some things from the tree of life where you can utilize that in some of your ritualistic work, no doubt. But the Kabbalion, which is I've recommended, or the 7 principles of Tahuti, or the 7 hermetic principles, is something I recommend any magician to read because it'll help you understand the power of the mind, especially the very first principle, all is mental. Mental is all, and those that have been following or working with me or dealing with me for years know, I'm strong in supporting that. Because remember, when dealing with the Egyptian mysteries, the 7 hermetic principles of Tahuti are deals with the subjective, and the laws of Ma'at deal with the objective. You have to understand both to know how they work in conjunction. In a lot of these Kemetic conscious circles, everybody's always focusing on Ma'at. It's Ma'at this and Ma'at that. And as I said, a black magician, we're not trying to obtain balancement, because balancement represents a state of stagnation. We're trying to obtain harmony. There's a difference. Balancement and harmony, though yet similar, but very different. And that's what we're trying to obtain. How do we harmoniously work with all those different energies? How are we able to use those energies and facilitate them at specific times when need be? Because as I said earlier, there's going to be periods of time where you need to invoke an aggressive, raw, powerful type of energy in certain situations to get results. There's going to be time where you need lighter type of healing type of energy to work in certain situations and scenarios. That is the challenge of the adept, finding the right harmony, not balancement, because we don't balance. Again, represents the middle, right? Israel Regardie put a book out years ago called The Middle Pillar, which that's more high magic. I had mentioned that a little while back on a couple shows back. That's dealing with that whole, Order of the Golden Dawn type of magic. And that's not technically really black magic. Some people think it is, but it's not. It's what they call high spiritual magic. I like to refer to it as gray side of magic. It's not Wicca or white magic. It's definitely not black magic. It's like smack in the middle. All right. And Manly P. Hall, if you are a Mason, and as I've said before, I have traveled through the lodge, across the desert, through the shrine, went to Scottish and New York, right? Most Masons, you don't have to be a Mason if you deal with the occult. Manly P. Hall has put out a lot of books on it, especially on occult symbols. But that deals more with some of the hidden aspects, of the occult. Now he mentions, there's certain things in there that he writes about in a lot of his work that can be classified or identified to some extent as black magic, no doubt. But he's dealt vastly with a lot of different occult symbols and topics. So that's a good place to start, or a good place to be grounded in, the Hermetic principles and some of the works of Manly P. Hall, which should motivate and lead you into maybe more intense areas. But definitely, it's a good track to at least be on in the right area or the right direction, no doubt. All right. So let's see what else we got. Okay, I see Sister Man. I think she said she had to learn how to break off for work. Peace out. Lady Williams, greetings, Lady Williams. How you doing? Did the work, seeing results, and I, we're not going to talk about it in the open. I've done a consultation with Lady Williams, so I would assume she's talking about some of that stuff, and that's good to hear. And I hope you're talking about that last thing, but we can talk further about that. All right. Erwin Westerborg types in greetings from Caraco. Very interesting. Welcome, Erwin. Jamal Adams, no problem. Okay, Jamal Adams. I'm beginning my path on a serious level. That's good. And again, remember on this path, there's a lot to learn. And I've always tell people this. It's your intent and your sincerity. It don't matter if you've been on this path 1 year, 5 years, or 25 years. As long as your intent is in the right place. That's why I was saying if some people came in late, that's why I was saying in the very beginning of the show, what is your purpose or your intent for being on this path? Why do you want to study this spiritual system? Because this is not for everybody. I'm going to be honest with you. Most people come to this, and the answer is simple because, as I said earlier, you should be wanting to do this to better yourself. It's called the path to self-mastery, to bring out that God in you, to really test yourself, to really challenge yourself on all levels. This is not about a path where, boom, here's the manual, and here's all the instructions, and you just follow the manual book, and you're going to become this fucking guru. That's not what this path is about. If you want to be challenged every day on a regular basis, if you want to consistently keep learning and you want to always be tip-top sharp and on your toes at all times, this is the path for you. If you're not an individual that likes to be challenged, if you're somebody that likes conformity or a regular routine, like most religions and philosophies and dogmas have, where they repetitively do the same shit over and over, if you like that individual, you like to go to church every Sunday and do the same old boring shit, this is not for you. This is about challenging every aspect of yourself. This path will challenge you to the utmost level. What I mean by that is it's going to bring out the good and the bad in you. You're going to find out some shit you thought you were good at, you really wasn't as hot shit you thought you were. Vice versa. It's going to bring out some hidden talents that you had that you never knew were there because you weren't drawn in that area to focus energy upon it. So when we say that it's about being a god or a goddess, we hear this in so many different conscious circles. I always ask somebody, well, what does it mean to you to be God? I ain't talking about some rehearsed answer you read in some book from some cultural group or organization, because I get the same rehearsed answer. Being God is being responsible, right? Responsible in the sense that now you know, and you're also held accountable, right? When we say on this path we're a god or a goddess, not a god or a goddess in the definition of your monotheistic definition of it. If you're looking at it like, oh, so you're saying you're a god of the Bible, the Quran, that's a fake, fictitious, man-made, spook mythological god that men put into existence by way of the pen. We're not talking about that mythological God. We're talking about an individual that is the governor of their spirituality. They dictate their spirituality, not something or somebody or some mystical spirit force in the sky that doesn't exist. So some people get it twisted when they hear that term because they're still indoctrinated with religion and spookism. They hear the term God. Oh, wait a minute. If you're on this path, you know what I mean when I say God or goddess. God or goddess in that sense. So we take responsibility and we accept our successes and all of our failures. We don't blame nobody for our failures. So that's the burden that might, so to say, or the stress or the importance of this path is that you also take responsibility for your failures. You understand that? We don't blame nobody. That's a hard thing for some people to do because most people, when they fail, they're finger pointers. They're shifting the blame away from themselves as if they didn't have any type of influence on the outcome. Well, your decision, one, was the first influence, regardless if it was something that transpired outside of yourself. It always starts within. All is mental. Mental is all. So that's what we mean when we say on this path. So again, I'm gonna be honest with you. It's not for everybody. I've said that before. We're not really concerned on this path, what you like and you don't like. See, that's the other thing. People get caught up in their personal emotions. And I've dealt with this for over 20 years. I don't like this, or I don't agree with that. This is my favorite. I. Everything is I. This path ain't for you. We're not concerned. See, that's personal shit you got to wrestle with. Remember, we were talking about integrity, morals, the perception of what is right and wrong is going to be personal to an individual based on how they perceive things. This is very important to understand. When you're dealing with I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't agree with this, I think, anybody that always starts a sentence with they're struggling. They got serious internal issues. They got serious problems. And we make it clear, and anybody that's on this path knows that's some personal shit you got to wrestle with. I, for one, am not concerned with what you do and you don't like. That's not my problem. That's not why I do this. That's not why I put information out there. I don't put information out there because I expect you to agree with everything I say, because that would be just downright foolish. I expect for you to explore and have your own experiences and come to the conclusion for yourself, whether you agree or disagree with me. But the very fact, even if you do disagree with me, the very fact that I could spark your thought process to incite you to think thoughts, just the fact to be in opposition to what I'm saying, we started an intellectual dialogue. And that's what this path is about, challenging yourself. So always keep that in mind, all right? What else did I miss here? Blah, 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 blah. Tanisha typed in, would tarot cards be considered white magic? Just depends on how they're used. So the answer to that question is yes and no. And it also depends on what deck and archetype system you're working with. I, for one, per se, use the Tarot of the Dead, which deals more with black magic and vampirical forces. You do have fluffy decks out there that deal with like nature, or the main Arthur Edward White tarot deck. That's basic. So the answer to that question just depends on what deck you're using and what energies that they're working with. So yes, they could be both. Just depends on what you're working with. And yeah, I would say that too to Esmail Bay. I've even used just images on tarot cards that you can work with in visualization. You could take specific images from those cards and do works with, in addition to doing readings or layouts. But it just depends, again, on what type of deck you're using, what purpose, and what system you're working with them. All that's connected. All right. Jamal Tyson, I know my questions are elementary, but I'm trying to do my work properly. No, there's no such. You ever hear that? There's that term. There's no such thing as a bad question. All of us, and especially myself, I have the full understanding that everybody is at different levels in their journey. We can't expect one thing a teacher or an elder or somebody that's educating or providing information has to take into consideration. Everybody's at different levels in their spiritual evolution. So it doesn't matter if your questions are elementary, advanced, beginning, whatever. There's no such thing as a bad question. When we work on this path, we have to know that. And I'm fully conscious of that, but that's the way you learn. So, ask the questions you need to ask in hopes that it motivates and pushes you in the right direction. So it's irrelevant. Whatever questions you ask, that's fine. Invoking Ogun, that's a powerful energy. I know that was in reference to what I was saying before about invoking different energies. You know what I mean? And know what you're fucking with. Because I've seen people fuck with shit they thought they were ready for, especially when it comes to the Loha in the Vodun pantheon. I've seen people do shit that they probably shouldn't do. And that just comes to, again, educate yourself. Be knowledgeable of what you're doing. Make sure you're aware of what you're getting into as far as what you're dealing with. Because where black magic can become dangerous, and we don't say this in a spooky, horrific sense, when you're working with, say, an energy that you're not prepared to deal with mentally, it can create more problems for you than it can, help you. So it's very important you understand that. So if you're working with something that you may not be fully aware of or educated to, I don't recommend you do it until you're fully comfortable, especially with vital energies, for an example, in working with the Loha Vudan. All right, what else we got here? Let me see what else I missed here. Trial and errors, how you learn, no doubt. Coordinated chaos, peace. Old Bronx, New York, peace, God. Peace, brother or sister. I'm not sure if you're a brother or sister. Peace. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, Manny, the struggle is real. And that is the thing to always know. See, remember, we have an old saying in alchemy, right? There's an old saying, out of chaos comes order. We apply that in black magic too. You must have the chaos, the darkness first, before you can have the order. Okay? Now, there will always be chaos, right? Like in the story to Apep, right? And Set. Set was the only one that was able to keep Apep at bay or keep order out of that chaos, right? So that's what we mean. That's what we mean when we say, look, you must be able to tap into the isolated consciousness of what Set represents to destroy that chaos or the God within and to make order out of it. But here's the thing. When we say the struggle will always, it continues, but now the adept is prepared to deal with the chaos when it comes. See, when you have no knowledge of self, or you haven't tapped into the power of this knowledge and wisdom, when the chaos comes, you're not prepared to deal with it. That's what the story of Set slaying Apep represents, right? When does the chaos kick in the most? Mentally. In the late hours when you're laying in bed. You want to know why? Think about it. There's a point where everyone lays down at night where all their worries, doubts, and fears come into play. They worry about maybe their job, their career, money, personal life, family issues, things of that nature. That's Apep rising up. Because remember, Apep comes, right? The story as it's recorded in the Egyptian mysteries, how it's recorded is Ra would keep Apep at bay in the night hours until the sun rose, right? It's the same when Apep comes to you through your mind and emotions is during those same hours. Tide also went to the vampiric energy and working black magic. Why is it powerful to work magic during the midnight hours to 6 a.m., right? You're dealing also with that Apep energy. How many of us lay up in bed sometimes at night or in the process of falling into sleep? We're wondering about, I got this bill to pay. I got to handle that tomorrow. I got to do this. You might have personal issues, family things you're dealing with. That's Apep coming for you in those hours, right? The only thing that slays it when you tap into your Set mindset, right? The isolated consciousness of Set. The God in you rises and destroys that way of thinking. You understand? This is the key. This is what this represents. See, apply this system in a practical, everyday reality, and you'll see that it makes a hell of a lot more sense. Okay? So hopefully that helped. Let's see what else we had. Mandy types in, once you accept, then there are no limits. That's right. This is a good question here. I like this. Coordinated chaos types in, how do you claim greatness? I don't know how I've grown to feel bad about being good at whatever I do. Well, again, we were talking earlier about don't have no regrets. You can only be what you are. Not saying in this case that's what you're doing, But one, you don't really concern yourself with what anybody thinks, because usually if you're feeling a certain way, that's usually from outside influences, or maybe or how things or people are perceiving you. If you're getting all I say is this: regardless of what category or you put that in, if you're getting results and you're not maliciously harming anybody, keep doing what you're doing. It doesn't matter what people think or what people perceive. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's just completely irrelevant. So just feel good about doing what you're doing and being you. Ogun is no joke. Yeah, we talked about that. And that's true. Like Jackie, Ismail Bay types, and we all know a little. And when we think we master that, we don't know shit. And that's that old adage: a wise man knows he knows nothing. Once if you start thinking in your mind, you wake up and you start thinking in your mind that you know something. That's where you can get sidetracked. That's where the wrong part or the wrong thing to think or get submerged in your ego is when people start walking around thinking they know something. And see, that tends to be the problem in a lot of conscious circles. Somebody reads a few books on Egypt, somebody read a book on the Metu Neter, and now they're a Metu Neter scholar, and they start using fancy words and fancy terms and all these big references, and you get caught up in that. And in essence, I've always said, what results does that fucking really prove? What results? I mean, what results are you getting from that, and what does it really prove is what I'm trying to say. So the thing you got to really take into account when we say the term, you have the term humble yourself, right? It don't mean to be docile and passive and let people take advantage of you, right? We have a saying in Masonry that says, listen with an attentive ear. I've talked about this before, right? People listen, but they don't hear. And as I said before, what great mystic, prophet, or sage or ever received a revelation while they were talking? Name me one. Any of the stories and any of the traditions or spiritual systems you go into, any prophet, mystic, or sage was in a state of silence, meditation, some type of inner focus, visualism, whatever it was. They were silent because they were listening for the voice of the spirit, their ancestors, the creator, whatever you want to use to get you through the night. And that's how they received their revelation. And that's what I mean. Sometimes when we say a wise man knows he knows not, sometimes we got to learn to listen. So what I've found is people that think they know something tend to have diarrhea of the mouth. They tend to just ramble on and on. And you can always tell when somebody just read something new, because it's usually rehearsed and regurgitated straight out the book. So yeah, you one way to approach this path is like that phrase Jack typed in: a wise man knows he knows nothing. And again, that doesn't mean you don't know nothing and you're stupid or you're ignorant. It just means one knows how to humble themselves and learn. And one knows how to take the approach that you're constantly learning every day. Because if we all knew it all, we wouldn't even be here having this dialogue right now. We all come to forums like this because we want to learn and we want to grow, right? We any forum we go into, right? Any spiritual system you study, you should be studying it with the intent, I want to learn, I want to grow. Because if we all had it all figured out and we knew the answer to everything in the universe, shit, you wouldn't even need to be here. You wouldn't even need to exist on this physical realm. Come on. So yeah, that's a good methodology and way to approach it. So okay, I don't see. If anybody's got any more questions, type them in. I'm gonna stay on for a little bit longer. I don't see any more questions. So again, the whole point in understanding the topic, because obviously it went into other venues, other areas, This topic actually could branch into a multitude of areas. But again, I want to just stress it's not for everybody, and we've talked about that a multitude of times. This is not a path for the weak of mind, the weak of heart. None of that. I've watched people get and again, I don't say this, create no spookiness. I watched this path scare people right back into being Christians again. I literally have. Because some people get on this path and they encounter a point where they face something about themselves that they fear, and then they go run back into what they used to do because they think that's going to cover it up and mask. And I'm saying that to say the first thing you will encounter on this path is your real self. I say your real self. Now, understand what that means. Not who you think you are, right? Because a lot of us think we're something, and we find out on this path that's not what we really are. We're not talking about who you think you are. We're not talking about who you want people to see you as, because some of us spend our lives portraying a certain image to others because that's how we want to be seen. That's how we want to be perceived. That's how we want people to look at us, right? That's not the real you. And then there's the actual real you. Well, this path will bring out the real you. It's going to bring out all your strengths, and it's going to show you all your weaknesses, right? It's going to show you everything that's fucked up about yourself. And then the challenge becomes, are you willing to address those things that need to be addressed to correct them? And let me give you an example if you're confused. It could be maybe, again, as I've mentioned, you may not be a good parent. Maybe you need to brush up on your skills being a mother or a father. Maybe you got daddy or mommy issues that affected you from a child to now that you have not addressed, that you thought weren't affecting you. Maybe you have this fear of speaking in public that started when you were a child and it's affecting you today. Maybe you have social anxiety that started when you were a very young child and it still affects you today. Maybe you get in a large group of people and you get anxiety. See, we don't think that those things are big deals, but they are big deals. These deal with lack of that social anxiety usually is a blockage in the throat chakra. The throat chakra deals with expression. I've talked about that before. Sometimes a lot of these things can be relieved by doing healing and chakra work, right? Just one aspect. You could even use sorcery on some of these scenarios and situations. Some of you might have sexual issues you're dealing with, right? The list can go on and on and on. What do I mean by that? One thing I've seen that fucks a lot of people up on this spiritual path, and even paths outside of this, is it's really, and I myself haven't been a victim of sexual abuse, but sexual abuse is something that leaves somebody scarred mentally and affects them for a long period of time. If you've been, child molestation, for an example, be it a man or a woman, when an individual has been child molested, that is a traumatic event that stays embedded in the subconscious, and it can affect an individual in a multitude of areas of their life. And that's something that's not talked about or addressed. What will happen on this path, all that stuff will come to the surface, and you have to address it. If you're not prepared for that, I've seen people come in and a lot of their shit bubbled to the surface and they just didn't want to deal with it. So they went back and they masked it. They think praying it and meditating it away is going to make it disappear. And that's just creating more resistance. So that's important to understand. Important to work with. And again, not everybody's cut out to do that. Now, on the flip note, I've seen a lot of people, grow tremendously and literally transform themselves because they were willing to do the work and sacrifice and get the things done they needed to. And the hardest thing too is to shed a lot of things that you thought were a reality to you prior to coming on this path. You can't carry that over. You can draw upon some of the strengths of them, but when they restrict you, I've watched a lot of people who say they're not religious. Or you got let me give you an example. This shit kills me. People will say they're God, They believe that they're God. I'm God. I'm God. I'm gonna get this. But then they'll use terms like the Most High, right? And I'll say, like, when you say in the Most High, what are you referring to? Are you referring to some spooky God outside of you? What are you referring to when you say that? I'm just a little bit thrown off when somebody who claims to be God says the Most High God. Are you acknowledging something outside of yourself? And how does that differ from a Christian that goes to church and is praying to some spook God in church that resides outside of themselves? So you can't be a god or a goddess if you're using the term Most High, because that's religion. Okay, no matter how you try to sugarcoat it, no matter how you try to package it up, that is a concept that one would have to completely alleviate before being successful on this path. Because the only thing that's really a reality that you can confirm is you. It starts with you. When you go back into the 7 Hermetic principles, the 7 principles to Huti, all is mental, mental is all. Everything resides within. You have to be able to tap into that power. When we start externalizing things and we start looking for that answer outside of ourselves, this is where we get trapped in different dogmas, religions, philosophies, and false spiritual systems that don't teach you about the power of self. Because that's really the only reality. You start with self, right? You confirm that you are a reality. You have faith that there's some mystical, spooky force that resides outside yourself, right? But what really gives it the power? I don't care if you're a Christian or whatever your belief is. What really gives it the power and the energy is your belief in that. But you really can't confirm it. What gives it life and energy is your belief that that's a reality. That's the same way spiritual magic works, because that would be the same as enforcing your will on a situation for a favorable outcome. It's the same. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same thing when you look at, let's look at it this way. How many of us know somebody that came out of jail and became religious, right? And then they equate getting their stuff together. They're getting their stuff together to whatever religion they converted to. Now, you're in a controlled environment where there's some type of religious spirituality there. Of course, you're going to grasp and gravitate onto that. And find some type of solace or comfort in it. But again, it was really the power of self that created that success. You can attribute it to some external spook force, but that's not what did it. Because at the end of the day, a religious person can't prove that God or Yahweh or Jehovah exists without using some type of religious scripture. They can't do it. And if you ask them to prove it, then they have to go real spook on you. It just doesn't make any sense. All right. Where else did I miss here? Only type saying, Brother B, your energy so real. I feel like I can accomplish a lot on this path. I love learning. I appreciate your knowledge and sharing it. Well, that's good. Keep sharing it and keep learning. Fire in the hearts. I used to have absolutely this. Oh, this is good here. I used to have absolutely crippling social phobia all my life. I'm talking to the point of selective mutism and panic attacks. Finally sucked it up and worked it out through getting a job as a receptionist and beginning my journey on the left-hand path. It's been awesome. That's good to hear. And I'm glad you shared that with us. That's exactly an example of what I was just talking about a couple of minutes ago. Some people have social anxiety. And I'm glad to see you working on it and getting results and moving in the right direction. See, we don't think things like that are important, and we don't think things like that hinder our spiritual growth. And some people will mask their issues by engrossing themselves in some spiritual system. And they think they're going to meditate it away. And it's, suppress everything and master everything of this world. And don't be in the, all that's fluffy garbage. That shit doesn't work. But I'm glad you shared that with us. And the left-hand path is a good area to work on something like that, because
a phobia, a fear, anxiety, panic attacks. That's a serious thing. A lot of people deal with that on a multitude of levels. So the fact that you're able to address it and deal with it, that's awesome. That's really good. All right, what else we got here? Lady Williams types in, you are so correct. I remember when dealing with my childhood issues, I went to see a therapist, and right in the middle of the session, I stopped and actually told her that there's nothing she can do. Yeah, and that's a normal thing for somebody to do. Is shut down like that when you're dealing with certain issues. It's just a way of not dealing with and addressing them. But yeah. Step one, though, is just like any scenario when you got an issue, is admitting it. See, I think that's the hardest step. I think once you're able to admit that there's an issue, it's easier to move forward. I think the challenging thing is most people don't think they got nothing wrong with them. That's the fucked up part. And that's a problem in itself. That's a whole nother story. But that's what most people think, or they'll be in denial or they'll shut down. It just, so that's a normal thing. Esmail El Bay typing, as we grow, how do we keep balance? As I said, I like to use the word harmony, but if you want to use balance, that's fine in this situation. By being consistent, that's the way we keep that harmony, is by being consistent at what we do. Most people that have that imbalancement / harmony are not consistent at what they do. It's that simple. We'll find that there's periods, or people will find there's periods where they stay consistent at what they do. And that's the challenge. It could be very challenging in this day and time with all the shit that we got to face and deal with just in everyday society. The pressures of making money, if you're a family person, raising a family, etc. That can take a lot of time from you. So I find prioritizing your time is the way to keep harmony and balancement in order for you to work on things that you need to do spiritually. That's the biggest challenge in this day and time, I find, with a lot of people, and including myself, to certain levels. You must stay consistent at what you do. That's how you maintain that harmony and balancement. You'll find usually when things are out of whack, it's because you're not addressing areas of need at that given time. You understand? That will happen. Trust me. All right. Fire in the hearts again on her situation. I'm sorry. I'm not sure if I'm brother or sister, but mine was extreme. It wasn't easy, but very worthwhile to face it and grow. And that's a beautiful thing. The key is you faced it. And if you're willing to do that, admitting it and facing it, I mean, that's winning more than half the battle. The rest isn't going to be as hard. Trust me when I tell you, because it's like lifting that burden off your shoulder. When you realize you have a problem and you make the commitment to address it, bam, everything just kind of takes off from there. All right. Lady Williams type in, to help me, I can only help myself. That all she was doing was reflecting on my words, and that was it. Okay. That was from Lady Williams. I didn't shut down in reference to your therapy session. I didn't shut down. I knew it was up to me to face the issues. I knew what the issues were, but I needed to stop masking it and deal with it. Exactly. And that's exactly what I was talking about earlier. Yeah. Look, and nobody ever said, it's that old saying, anything good working for is going to be hard. Anything that promises you a quick fix, easy, and that's the problem with a lot of things in life today. Everything creates this illusion that everything's fast. You're going to get it just quick. This is going to fix everything. That anything that promises you a quick fix, I'm going to tell you is bullshit for the most part. Let's just be 100%. Let's be real. Be alert of that. If you really want results and you really want to do things on this path that are going to get results, you must stay consistent. It's the best thing I can say. Yeah, and that's a good point. Matthew Watson types in, we do have a fast food mentality. Unfortunately. We want everything fast, right? We want to go online. We want same day delivery, next day delivery. But there's a conscious effort in society to do that. There's a conscious effort. That's why I was saying earlier, there's all these distractions we must face and deal with on a daily basis. Now think about today in 2018. If anybody out there that's old in my age or close to it, a little bit younger, all right. If you're in the 30 to 40 group, just think about how things have changed drastically from 20 years ago, just with technology in itself. There's a programming in that itself subconsciously. You're being programmed with all those aspects, whether you're aware of it or not. So we're taught that I want it now. We're taught that, and you should have I want it now mentality, but you should be backing it up with some work and some push to it. Not like I'm gonna sign up for something like how many get rich quick schemes are out there, right? Anything that promises you if you just sign up and pay this little amount of money, you're going to become rich. I mean, come on, you got to be fucking stupid in this day and time to fall for some garbage like that. And that's not what this path is. This path is the correct, and this is just my opinion. This path is the correct path in the sense that it checks all the boxes, if you understand what I'm saying. You know how to say, dot your I's and cross your T's and make sure all the boxes are checked. That's what this path does. It's not going to leave anything unchecked. Common sense sometimes. All right. Coordinated chaos type saying, knowing our fates is in our hands can be kind of scary, no doubt. How can one feel more at ease? Do we need a guidance? I'm a young person. Don't know how young you are, but yes, especially when you're young, you need guidance to a certain level. And I talk about this all the time. You shouldn't have guidance in the sense that you're solely relying on that guidance, because there's a lot of spiritual systems that have that same motif. There's some leader or head guru, and you have to do what the leader or the guru says. That could be a dangerous guidance, because usually that individual has an agenda, or that group has an agenda, and there's usually a system of control. But whatever you're studying and seeking out, per se, if it's this path, you should be able to go to elders and guides and teachers that can assist you, teach you, give you information to push you in the right direction. But while that process is going on, you should be doing things initiatively on your own. You should be exploring things, having your own experiences, trying things. And what you're not unsure of, you can get guidance from teachers, elders, books, personal study. But take that whole formula and system and you should never rely on anybody but yourself. But it is okay to seek guidance, especially at a younger age. You understand? But be selective, because make sure, I got to be honest with you, on any spiritual path, you do have wolves in sheep clothing, as they say, right? A religious term from the Bible. There will be people that will try to devour your innocence, so to say. So make sure if you do work with a teacher, a guide, or an elder, you feel comfortable with them. You don't feel like they're taking advantage of you, because let's be real. Unfortunately, that exists in a multitude of spiritual systems. So, yeah. But no, there's nothing wrong. Just don't solely depend and rely on that guidance or person. You understand? But definitely. All right. Many largely have an inability to aversion to just being with themselves in a silent peace to process them. And I'm going to tell you why, fire in the hearts. That's a good point. I've talked about this before, and I'm glad you brought that up. I found I do this as a test. And if you ever come to one of our physical gatherings, I'll turn off all the lights and do this. Well, if you have a problem, you ain't going to be able to do it by yourself. I've turned off all the lights and put people in a pitch black room. Not an ounce of light coming through. No candles, no incense, pure silence. And I said, look, we're all gonna meditate in silence. No more than being in there 2 or 3 minutes. You hear the people that can't sit still, people fidgeting, moving around. And I do this just for that reason, just to get a gauge on who's this. That is a confirmation of people that are dealing with personal shit. there's an inner conflict, because when they're in that darkness and silence and it's just themselves, the real self is coming to the surface. You refer to it as the motion, to reflect, all that, the whole process. When you're sitting in pure darkness and silence, the real mind starts to manifest. The mind starts to focus in areas that you might fear because things are coming to the surface that you're not comfortable with addressing. And usually it manifests physically in that individual that can't sit still, that's constantly moving. So, scratching their face, rubbing their eye, moving their legs around, moving their hands, changing their position every minute. That is what we call a disturbed soul, in the sense that there's some inner trauma that they're not dealing with. That's the distraction. The question is, you got to discipline yourself to let those emotions and thoughts rise to the surface so you can address them. And I told everybody, there was an exercise we have talked about on the radio show and here. Do that winding staircase ritual that we had talked about. Go into a completely dark room, completely silent, darkness. Get yourself into a state of relaxation. Start to concentrate and focus. When you feel like you're relaxed and focused, visualize a winding staircase going counterclockwise. If you focus on that counterclockwise stairway, it's going to start. You'll go into a deep state, and you'll start to go back through certain incidences in your life. Trust me when I tell you, if you do it right. And most people I've talked to, they've done it right. It will take you to moments in your life, good and bad. Mostly it'll take you to things that are going to stand out, that are affecting you. Take a mental note of them and then address it after you identify it. It could take you back to a situation where you were on the schoolyard and you were bullied. And then that's a telltale sign that's still affecting you subconsciously today. It has a traumatic effect on you. It could, it might have been a time where, you had an argument with your mother or father and some really heated exchange took place and it's affected you traumatically more than you know. I'm just giving you examples. But you will, in that darkness, remember, all things emerge out of the darkness. Or like I say, even religious people don't catch it. If God in the book of Genesis, first chapter, first verse said, in the beginning, God said, let there be light. That's confirmation God existed in darkness before he said, let there be light. So why do we fear the darkness? Think about when you were a little kid and you would go to sleep at night, right? Where did this concept come in that we have to sleep with a night light, right? You got to have a light on, right? Some people can't sleep without a TV being on all night because there's something they're afraid of, going into that darkness and encountering the shadow self or the real self. Why do they fear? What are they afraid of? Then the mind starts to play tricks on you, right? How many of us were sleeping at night and might have, looked on the back door of our room door and we had a hanger, a jacket or a sweatshirt hanging on there. And then you start looking at it long enough, you think it's something moving, because your mind starts to really kick in. Your real self comes to the surface in the darkness. See, all of these philosophies and religions got it wrong when they say come into the light. That's reverse. You must come into the darkness to understand yourself, right? You remember the movie that came out about a year or so ago? And it's from they took a phrase from the Assassin Order, the Order of the Assassins, the movie Assassin's Creed, right? They used the phrase that goes back to the Assassin Brotherhood, right? One must go into the darkness to do the work of the light. Reflect on that for a minute. One must go into the darkness to do the work of the light. What does the light represent to a left-hand path practitioner or even a Luciferian? The word Lucifer means light bearer, right? It's an archetype. Don't confuse that with Satan of the Bible. The Illuminati or the illuminated ones. I love all these people that do videos on the Illuminati as if they were a fucking member of the Illuminati. Jay-Z's in the Illuminati. How the fuck do you know that? Are you in the Illuminati? And if you're not in the Illuminati, then you possibly couldn't know that. You only know that because you watched some video on YouTube or read some conspiracy shit on the internet or some book, or you watch somebody do a lecture giving their opinion. Trust me, Jay-Z is not in the Illuminati, okay? Neither is Beyonce. Just because you saw them do some symbol like this, oh, look, they're throwing the 3 6s out. See, that shit is put out there for people who are spooked the fuck out, so they can get caught up in that conspiracy theory, sensationalism bullshit. People that live for that stuff are weak-minded individuals that can be tricked. I can fuck with people like that all day. And they're the easiest people to do work on because they're so weak mentally, because they're so busy looking for conspiracy theories. You understand? And they're so busy looking for excuses of why they're not doing shit themselves. You understand that? So when we say one must go into the darkness to do the work of the light represents the intellect, the knowledge. You can only obtain true knowledge of self, right? What does it mean in the Bible when it really said the light shineth in the darkness and the darkness comprehendeth it not? The Christians will tell you that's Jesus. Jesus was the light that came into the world. Sounds good, but it's a bunch of bullshit. That light that shines in the darkness and the darkness comprehendeth it not. That's talking about this. That's that pure intellect, right? Let's look at it from a Masonic perspective. One goes through the Masonic law, especially in the Blue House, and well, not just the Blue House, but we'll talk blindfolded, right? And in that darkness, one relies on the pineal to get them through the third eye, to get them through the ritual, because you're relying on pure intellect. That light, right? That light that shines in the darkness and the darkness comprehended or not. When you're in that darkness, you're not relying on these two eyes, you're relying on this eye, because you're using your perceptions, how you see, what you're hearing, what you're feeling. And it's like it all merges as one great sense. And you're able now. I remember when I went through, after being blindfolded for so long, it's like I didn't even need my eyes no more going through the ritual. I didn't even depend on them. I didn't even rely on them because I realized that was the illusion. That was part of the illusion. And where the real confusion came in was when the blindfolds were removed and they said, let there be light. Now we're talking about the artificial light, not the intellect. Because when the blindfold is taken off, they're taking you out of from the light intellect into the artificial light that blinds, right? Because first thing that happens when the blindfold comes off and the lights are cut on, your eye, you got to adjust because you were blindfolded for so long. Now you're in a state of confusion for a minute or two till your eyes adjust to the artificial light. Now you came from the state of being God into the illusionary world, right? Or the matrix. See, that's the trick. If you don't understand the Masonic degrees, you can get fucked up in that too. See, on the surface, a Mason would falsely interpret that. See, I don't look at it like that. Masons who are religious, who claim not to be duped. I didn't come into the light when the blindfold was taken off. I came into the artificial light, the world of illusion. What I reflect on in the degrees when I go back through my Masonic initiation is when I was in that darkness, is when I was at my peak. When I was in that darkness, when I was at my strongest mental power. But as soon as I was taken out of the darkness and brought into the confusion of the artificial light or the illusionary world, that's when bullshit started to kick in. So we got to stop this bullshit with coming to the light. You need to be enlightened, brother. There's a difference between being enlightened and illuminated. That's why they say the Illuminati are the illuminated ones. Ones that have a certain level of intellect or knowledge. Knowledge is power. Those that don't have a certain level of knowledge of others, that power can be used against those individuals. You got to understand, look, the way this world is going today in 2018, people are caught up in the race part of shit. This ain't a black and white thing no more. This is a knowledge power thing. If you think solely what's going on right now in this country, and I know the powers that be have everybody focusing on Trump with this whole racial thing, and it's deeper than that. The reality with Trump is, and I can't stand the dude, and I'm not no way, shape, form, or fashion supporting him. But what you got to understand about Trump is he's a businessman. He is not anti-democratic. Neither is he pro-Republican. Republican just suits his agenda. Trump is about Trump. Trump is about the rich and the powerful. People are getting it fucked up. People are thinking that this is not about race. Trust me. Some people are going to find this out the hard way. This is about money and power. Okay. What Trump did and how he pulled off that election, whether there was interference from the Russians or not, his campaign strategy was how a businessman would strategize. See, Hillary Clinton went to all the populated states with Democrats in Democratic areas. Trump went to a lot of the blue collar areas that have more of the electoral votes. And even though he didn't win the popular vote, his strategy wasn't attacking the popular vote. His strategy was attacking the electoral vote. So you got to look at the totality of the picture and not get caught up in your emotions. As wacko as the man is, don't get caught up in your emotions when you're trying to figure out what's happening in this country and why it's happening. Because when you get caught up in your personal emotions, he wants to build a wall for Mexico. That's all about money. Trust me when I tell you. You're getting caught up in that shit and you're not looking at the overall bigger picture, okay? Where this country is going, you ain't got no middle class no more. You either got money or you don't. Think about that for a minute. 20, 25 years ago, there was a such thing as the middle class. There is no such thing as the middle class no more. You either have money or you don't. That's the type of president you're dealing with. Don't get caught, because you can go back, and I mentioned this on a previous class. There was he did an appearance on a talk show in the late 90s where he was bashing the Republican Party, where he was completely saying that, and here's what, quote unquote, was his words. He said that they're the stupidest and easiest people to manipulate. I'll find it. It's on an older video, and I can't remember. It was either one of the big talk shows. I don't know if it was Montel or Phil Donahue or one of them shows. You can Google it and find it. Now, here we are in the 2000s. Why did he choose to run as a Republican Party when back then he was bashing the Republican Party? He told you on that show, because they're the stupidest and easiest people to manipulate. He knew he couldn't enforce his agenda running on the Democratic ticket. This shit is about money and business. At the end of the day, I don't care what anything you're dealing with in life, money's at the core end of it. I don't give a fuck what it is. But when you get caught up in your emotions and you think that it's solely a look, I told you with all the police shootings, maybe it was Phil Donahue in 78. I didn't think it was that far back, but I could be wrong. I've actually watched it. I don't know if it was that early, but anyway, I'll Google it and find it. If somebody can Google it and find it and put it up there, that'd be good. Like I said, with all these police shootings, right? All you got to do is go look up the statistics. They make sure they publicize anytime a black person gets shot to feed off of melanated people's emotions, blacks and Latinos, because they want us to revolt and get mad and go out on the street and protest so we could put ourselves in the line of fire and get killed, right? If you do the statistics, you can research it countrywide in your state. More white people get killed by police every year than black people do. You don't think so because they're not publicizing white people getting killed by police because it's not news. A white cop killing a white person is not news. Nobody wants to hear about that shit. But as soon as a white cop kills a black person, and I'm not justifying it because some of it is fucked up, but this is something that has always gone on. It's just now with social media, YouTube, Facebook, and cell phones and cameras, it's now downloaded in real time. And as soon as it happens, it's broadcasted. I keep telling people this shit that you see going on now, I was seeing this shit back in the 70s and 80s in New York. I used to walk to school watching them pull dead bodies out of dumpsters. I used to walk home broad daylight, beginning of the month, when TNT, which is the undercover police, would shake down the drug dealers because they knew welfare checks went. I'd watch them beat the fuck out of drug dealers. Not saying that I'm justifying the drug dealers. I'd watch them, 1987, that makes sense. I'd watch them take their money, beat the shit out of them in broad daylight in front of everybody, and nothing you can do. You understand? This police brutality shit is nothing new. People think it's new because we have all this social media technology now. So it's downloaded in real time. And I'm not justifying it because there's a lot of incidences that there are injustices. So I'm not saying that. I'm saying let's make sure we're being proactive and not reactive, because they're doing it so they can feed off of our emotions and get us to react. But this shit is not new to me. I don't know why people think that this shit is new. And you got to look at this in its totality. See, I see what Trump was trying to do. And again, look, some people are going to find the shit out the hard way. It's all about money and economics. Don't fool yourself. Don't get caught up in your emotions. Don't get caught up in your likes and dislikes, because that shit can cloud your thinking sometime. All right, let me scroll up. I think I might have missed a few things here. Jaleesa had typed in there, it took me years to stop sleeping without a light. Yeah, because we've been programmed with that fear. You must have some type of light. I can't sleep with any light now. I can't have a peep of light. It bothers me. It just, I can't. I can't do it. It's even hard for me to sleep with a, TV on for a long period of time. So we always make sure when we go to sleep that TV is completely off. I know people that have to have the TV on the entire night till they get up in the morning. You understand? Because that's some type of fear, inner fear that they're dealing with. One must go into the darkness to do the work of the light. You can't avoid it. You understand? If you keep trying to avoid it by hiding in all these fluffy religions, you must be enlightened, right? They fuck with you with even all these images of those Charles Manson Jesus images, right? They always have a halo around Jesus's head. And then they always have the heart with the crown of thorns with a halo around it. And then, he's like this and shit, and he's all illuminated. All of that spooky ass shit. Come on, we know all of us. I don't care if you're black, Latino, white, whatever you are. We all had that. Most of us had that fucking spooky ass picture of Jesus somewhere hanging in the house somewhere. You all know that creepy ass picture, this shit here, and looking all spooky and shit in the space, and he's got the fucking halo. And I mean, they look, to show you how deep the spell is. I don't care what you study or what you learn, how mental indoctrination is deep. I don't care if you've studied it. Well, Jesus was a black man. All right, cool. Watch that. Watch how deep the spell is. You can close your eyes right now. Right? Close your eyes right now. And if I say the word Jesus 3 times, that spooky ass image comes to your head in some form or fashion. Some will say, oh no, well, I see a black Jesus. But you had to force yourself to see that black Jesus. Trust me when I tell you, whether you were conscious of it or not. That goes to show you how the power of imagery is strong. You understand? It started then. I'm saying this in reference to the sleeping and all this indoctrination is to focus you away from not going within, to tap into the real you. And that's where that fear of in the darkness, because it's that fear of the unknown. Because as I can't remember who typed it earlier, your real emotions come to the surface, which is in essence the real you, or the shadow self, right? There's that old saying, when you walk outside in the day and you see the reflection of your shadow on the concrete or on the wall, that's the real you. You understand? We're afraid to connect with that because we just might find out some things that we're not comfortable finding out. And if you're not willing to do that on this path, I'm going to say to you again, this is not the spiritual system for you. Go back to being a Muslim and making salat, or go back to catching the Holy Ghost in church and deceiving yourself, thinking that, as long as you follow all the rules, that something's coming for you, the rapture, something's going to scoop you up. You're going to go to this place called heaven. What the fuck are you going to do when you get there? Just going to, what are you doing when you get there? You're just going to be at peace, and it's all bullshit. That's all mythology. The only salvation that's going to help you, just go take a look in the mirror. That's you. If you think anything else is going to assist you and bring you salvation, you're fooling yourself. Trust me. All right. Fire on Hearts types in, yes, I felt that discomfort, especially in the beginning of my practice. It was mainly commenting on how the presence of technology makes it harder to ever find that space silence. Just think about this. How many of us sit down? Let me show you how that's, even if you bring that up. How many of us sit down just to watch TV or do something else where we can't, the phone has to be right near us, or we can't do anything without stopping and picking up the phone every minute or two? Don't fucking front. Some of you are probably doing the shit right now as you've been zoned into this video. Well, some of you might be on your phone. You don't have no choice. But some of you are doing it right now as I'm speaking. That's a reality. If you don't think the programming subliminally is real, then you're foolish. The question is, how do you break that cycle? By doing the work, okay? Whenever I sleep in complete darkness, I wake up covered in sweat because you're dealing with some emotional trauma. And you need to identify what that trauma is. Because remember, the spiritual is connected to the physical. Always know that. There's a very thin veil, a line between the two. Okay. Yes, technology makes it easier to avoid the space if you don't discipline yourself. Okay, so you say the sweat, the waking up, not only when you're going through something, of course, there's some trauma. Lady Williams typed in earlier. I tell people that all the time. Trump is a businessman. He does not care about emotions. It's all business. 100%. Trump don't care about Democrats, Republicans. He, again, and I'm glad that Phil Donahue show that I believe was 87. You're right. When he made the statement, Republican Party is the stupidest party because they're the easiest people to manipulate. Now here he is in 2016 running on the Republican ticket because he knew that was the party he had to run under to propagate his agenda. See, when you do your real study and research and you don't get caught up in your emotions, see, a person that's caught up in their emotions, you can't reason with that person because they're caught up in their personal emotion. I don't like Trump because he's racist. Really? Racist in what way? Well, he wants to build a wall in Mexico. Okay. But what he outright came and said, not subliminally that was racist, that you interpreted. And I'm not, believe me, I'm making this clear. I'm not defending the guy. The guy's a straight fucking buffoon. I am in no way, shape, or form defending him. I'm trying to get people to look at this in its totality without getting caught up in their emotions. That's all I'm doing. So by all means, I am not pro-Trump and I'm not defending the dude because the dude is a whack job. But I'm saying he's got an agenda. And it's not pro-Republican, and he's not anti-democratic. He found a vehicle to push the agenda, which is global economic dominance. If you cannot see that, then there's something is wrong with you. Now, you could get caught up in your emotions about some of the things he's doing, but here's the one thing that he did do that nobody's giving him credit for. He might be the first president to get Korea to lay down its nuclear missiles. He might be the first president to get the North and South Koreans actually on the same page. But how come nobody's talking about that? I don't hear nobody talking about it. They're actually going to meet, have a summit. North Korea has agreed to stop their nuclear program. Now, I know this is a business thing for Trump. Oh, that's a whole nother thing. But I'm saying if you're caught up on the surface thing, if you want to talk about just on the surface what he's done is good and bad, I haven't heard nobody give him credit. Because if you remember, everybody criticized his hardline stance on North Korea by not saying, look, if you don't put your shit down, we're going to come in there and blow your ass up. See, here's the problem with people. People want change, but they don't want no sacrifice for that change. You understand? People want to get results, but they don't want to do nothing to get those results. And nobody's ever going to be completely happy with everything you do in life. That's just a reality. But I don't hear nobody saying, well, hey, wait a minute, maybe his hardline, hard-nosed stance, because people were saying he was crazy. He's going to put us in World War III. And this is the psycho that has his hand on the button. But see, I didn't look at it like that because I knew that this was this is a big move for him financially. And there's a deeper meaning to it. And Korea knows the economic move that this will be for them and opening up a dialogue, international commerce, etc. Stop getting caught up in your emotions. And you know what the deep thing about it is? If you're working this path, the shit is irrelevant. That's the whole point. That's another point, but I didn't even touch on that. All right. People think the world is much more dangerous. This was typed in by a fire in the hearts. People think that the world is much more dangerous than it is due to media and the interconnectivity of the world. It's overall one of the safest times to be alive. Correct me if I'm wrong. No doubt. With social media and things being downloaded in real time and on the spot, like I was saying earlier, there are certain powers that be who sensationalize and capitalize off of these things. It just seems like only the negative is always promoted. Of course, with the technological advance that we have just in the health field alone, it's a safer time to live. They have technology and things now that they could do now. I mean, just look at, for an example, a disease like multiple sclerosis, where 25 years ago, you were damned if you could live with full-blown MS for 8 to 10 years. Now they got medicines that can keep you alive forever. AIDS, shit. If you got money, look at Magick Johnson. He's probably the healthiest HIV patient I've ever seen in my life. That motherfucker was diagnosed in 92 and he's still going strong. Do I also believe that there's viruses that they keep out there for population control? Yes, there is. Do I believe that there is a cure for cancer? Most definitely. So we're kind of in a catch-22 here. It is an overall safer time to live, but it is also a more volatile time to live because it's kind of a double-edged sword. But the key is where you place yourself in the scheme of things. If you know that, as I said a minute ago, it's all relevant. It's just, remember, a black adept controls their immediate surroundings and environment. That's all you can control. And when you control your immediate environment and surroundings, everything else facilitates out. You can't control and save the whole world if you can't control your immediate environment. Nobody can penetrate that when you have mastered the discipline and knowledge of self. Trust me when I tell you that. Everything else is obsolete. It don't mean that what goes on in the world outside of your immediate surroundings environment doesn't affect you in some shape, form, or fashion. It just doesn't define who and what you are. There's a difference. And that's where I think people get confused. Because I remember I got an email a while back. It was some crazy shit. And I was talking about something similar that I just said. So I get some email from some dude that goes into this long rant about the New World Order. How can you say the New World Order doesn't affect you globally, this and that, blah, 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 blah. I said, because I'm not caught up in the sensationalism of it like you. I didn't say it affects the world as a whole. I'm saying it doesn't immediately affect you. What do I mean by that? It's not going to affect how you go about manifesting your wealth and your finance, your business. It's not going to affect how you maintain your family and your livelihood, regardless of how externally how bleak they make the situation. Oblique. You got me thinking about exercising. How bleak they make the situation look, because that's how they make it define you. When they show you shit, well, the Dow just crashed 400 points. That only affects you if you don't know your scheme and your place of things, of how you're doing business and how you work with money. You should have a plan where there's a way of getting around that. Commodities and things of that nature. I'm not going to get into all that now because that's a whole nother story itself. But the point is, this dude sent me this whole rant because, and I simply responded back to him and I said, and again, I don't respond back to ignorance. I kept my shit brief. I wasn't going to go into no fucking tyrant or some long outdrawn email. I said, see, the problem is you let fear control you. You let sensationalism control you. You're letting all that stuff define who and what you are. The more life you give it, the more you give power to it and the more it consumes you. So it's all about a mental approach to this. Here's the reality. No matter how bad shit gets, no matter how, when you look over the horizon right now, the state of this country and things that's going on right now, I'm talking about in a political climate, lo and behold, it's going to level itself out. Trust me when I tell you. I don't care how crazy the shit looks. You just got to know how the pattern and the system works. Okay. Chi types in, it's really hard for me to shake my Christian programming because even though I distanced myself from it at a young age, it still keeps coming up even when I don't want it, but I got to keep trying. That's a very good point. You know, and if a lot of other people would be real with themselves, they'll find that just happening sometimes against their will. And that's just confirmation. There's nothing wrong with that, or there's nothing to feel bad about that in a case, or it's just when you're indoctrinated with it from a young age, and most of us were. I mean, it started when we were small children, right? We were indoctrinated from a young age. That's not going to disappear in a short period of time. And the term you said, keep trying. You keep working at it. You keep trying. It eventually dissipates. Because I remember when I go back years, I found myself in the first couple of years on this path struggling with that. Not that I was doing it intentionally. I found it just subliminally. It would just come out of the surface. So that's something, the answer to that problem or to your question, that's something that just by being consistent in your study and your practice, that will start to evaporate in time. But it will not go away right away. Because remember, if you come into this path in your early 20s, you got 20 plus years of indoctrination to wipe clean from your mind. That's not something that's just going to disappear in a matter of a year or two. That takes time. So just there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, and yeah, with the phone thing, Jacob Smith typed in, the social media thing and getting off the phone. Yeah, I mean, all of these things are social media. We're on a social media platform right now. Social media can be a great tool, but it could also be a very destructive tool. That's why I was saying earlier about a double-edged sword. See, somebody on this path, how I approach the social media thing, I look at the positive aspect. This is a way where I can sit here right now in real time and talk to a group of people simultaneously, which is a beautiful thing. We're able to dialogue and build. That's how I utilize the benefits of social media. The negative is cyberbullying, identity theft. You got your social media gangsters that hide behind keyboards and talk shit and don't identify themselves, which is another form of nonsensical bullshit. So there's that double-edged sword. But again, it's how one is able to facilitate and work with that double-edged sword. Yes. So utilize the phone and social media for beneficial purposes. But when you're addicted to it and you can't put it down, shit, you know what's so fucked up? I've literally been at functions and events where people are in the same room and they're texting somebody in the same fucking room. How fucking mind controlling is that? How bad have they messed with our creativity when you're on one side of the room and there's somebody on the other side and your lazy ass can't even walk over there to talk to them? You got to fucking text them. That's some serious programming. So, yeah. Matthew Watson typed in, every time I sleep with no light, I have dreams I'm flying. Is the dream world the real world? Well, what's happening there is you definitely are typing into the astral realm or spiritual plane. The dream world is, I was saying a few minutes ago, there's a fine line between the physical and the spiritual world. I'm just going to use the term spiritual realm for lack of a better word. What happens is when you start to vibrate on a higher frequency outside of person, place, or thing from 3-dimensional, you start venturing into a 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional vibrational existence. Now you're going into what we call the spiritual realm. You're not confined by person, place, or thing. Usually people that experience that I'm flying in a dream, they're cracking in on the beginning stages of astral traveling or traveling the spiritual realm. I would just keep trying to discipline yourself, because sometimes what will happen is if your adrenaline's kicking in too high, whether you're conscious of it or not, it can prevent you from fully projecting. So I would really try to relax yourself when that's happening and try to go with it to the best of your ability to see where it takes you. But yes, that would be as real as what you term when your eyes are open and what's physical. You're touching your hand, your face. That is just as real. It's just on a higher vibrational existence. That's all. All right. I'm gonna wrap this up because I kind of gotta get out of here. That's pretty much the end of the questions for now. Again, you got the flyer for the event on May 25th. I sent that out. The class schedule, the online class schedule should be done in about another week. I'm going to send that out for those that email me and do want to do the online classes. If you are also interested in a consultation for any of those things, you can email me at khnum19@gmail.com. I ask you to at least give me a 2-day notice for the consultation. And if you can't get to me physically, it can be done via social media. I like to do it either on Google Hangouts or Skype or the emo app. It lasts up until 1 hour, and I charge $52 to do it. And it can be paid via PayPal, or you can pay over the phone before we start. So this way you don't have to email me how it works. And we pretty much dialogue on whatever you want to dialogue on. Any ancestral spirits, archetypes, any information that comes through on that level, we'll communicate, by that. And we kind of just go with the flow. But you dictate how that consultation works. So again, for any of the things mentioned throughout this, you can email me again at khnum19@gmail.com. I appreciate everybody tuning in. You know, I enjoy doing this. It's just what I love to do. I thank everybody that just came here to learn. And again, I'm not expecting everybody to agree with everything I say. That's not what this is about. I'm not telling you that everything I'm saying is the absolute 100% way, because it's not. What I am hoping that these classes and sessions do is push you in the right direction so you can study, research for yourself, have your own experiences, and then you can come to the realization of what truth is for yourself. So hopefully in some shape or form or fashion, this helps you in some way. And we'll talk soon. And again, I know some people have sent me emails. How do you get a notification when I go live? I got a couple emails about that. If you are subscribed to the channel, when you go to the homepage of the channel, right at the top, kind of at the top to the right, there's a bell icon. If you hit that, as long as you have that hit, that will notify you anytime that I go live. I know most of you already have that. All right. But anyway, I appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll talk soon. Peace.